Today, we're going to talk about how to help children set up boundaries. And we brought an expert, Dr. Chelsie Smyth. We're going to talk to her about what are boundaries and how to set them, and go on a journey with her on strategies that can help us raise the next generation of innovators. Welcome to our show,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Chelsie.
Thank you so much for having me.
How do you choose this branch of medicine?
So my whole, academic career, I was really focused on just finding balance between life and work. And so I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to work with kids. And so I found neuropsychology.
What a wonderful and fascinating, having a couple of topics today. But let's start by talking, what are boundaries in children, especially small children?
So boundaries are basically, our limits, our way to keep ourselves safe and our way to keep other people safe too.
What type of boundaries do we set?
So it can be many different things. We can set physical boundaries. We can set verbal boundaries. We can also set limits to behavior as well.
And can you start teaching young children how to set boundaries?
Absolutely. There's no such thing as a kid who may be too young to be able to learn how to set boundaries.
So, but give us an example, like a little kid, and how would you teach him or introduce a boundary?
Yeah. So really, we're already trying to teach our kids, even from infancy, about the world. We're modeling for them. We're setting these examples. And so really, when our babies are small, that's our main goal. As they begin to age, as they become more verbal, we start working on things like identification. A lot of parents think about this as body parts, right? This is our nose, our chin, and they start naming things. The next step beyond that is figuring out, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And so typically around age 2 is really when kids start grasping the concept a little bit better. What is okay? What's not okay? And emotions like embarrassment start coming into play in development. And so really we start looking into, how do we keep ourselves safe? How do we keep others safe? And then how do we make sure that what we're doing is not harmful to myself or someone else?
And how would a parent introduce this concept at a young age, such as 2?
So at a young age, we really start with rules, right? Don't touch the hot stove. We're not going to touch the knife because it's sharp. You could get hurt. That's a type of boundary. When it comes to physical boundaries, we start talking about safe and unsafe touch. So a lot of times we think about our swimsuits. For little kids, swimsuits are different for both boys and girls. And generally anything that the swimsuit covers is considered, more of a private area. We identify safe adults. So who's a safe adult? A lot of kids will say mommy, daddy, teacher. And then unsafe adults, or adults we may be less familiar with, may be considered, not necessarily that they're unsafe, but we just don't know if they're safe yet. Yes.
So you start talking about this boundaries at age 2?
Yes.
Like about safety and...
Yep. And remember, we're always trying to focus on meeting the kids where they're at. So some 2-year-olds may be able to understand better than others, but it all always starts with that identification and what's okay and what's not okay.
And fascinating. What about emotional boundaries? When do you start introducing them?
So that, I feel like we start as early as we can. I know with my own daughter, I've already started that with her. She's only 6 months. And of course, she can't really talk yet. But I kind of talk her through what she may be experiencing. And so I'll start saying things like, I can tell you're really frustrated right now. Mommy's going to change your diaper. And so really it starts with emotion identification. I can see it looks like you're feeling really frustrated. You look like you're feeling really sad. What's going on that's making you feel sad? From there, once they start understanding the emotions, we can start understanding maybe how different things make us feel different ways. You look really happy. What happened? Or you look really sad. What happened there? And maybe your child might say, oh, Jimmy pushed me when I was on the swing. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. And then take the conversation from there. Really, with emotional boundaries, it's about emotion identification, recognition, and understanding not just how other people's actions can make you feel, but understanding that your actions also affect others.
Wow. So this is so powerful to teach kids at a young age because setting that emotion also allows them to protect themselves and build some kind of resilience.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's fascinating. So what happens to those kids later in life that grow up without boundaries?
So a lot of times that can be really frustrating. I'm thinking more as they grow older, middle childhood, teenage years, they may struggle with structure. They may struggle in terms of communication as well. A lot of times these kids may appear as if they're constantly frustrated, agitated. They may have an attitude, so to speak. It's never too late to learn these things. It's just going to take a step. It's about taking a step back when they reach that point if they're a little bit older.
Yeah, in the science of growth mindset, we are always learning that we can always rewire our brain with
Absolutely.
those. That's fascinating. So what about what common mistakes do parents make when setting boundaries with kids?
Yes. And so I think some common things that I've seen in the past have more to do with maybe being a little too strict, or maybe we have trouble regulating ourselves emotionally. And that's okay. We're all human. So I think the biggest part as a parent is knowing where we're at emotionally. You had a hard day. Everybody needed you at the office. You had to put out 50 fires and you're exhausted, but you come home and you pick up your child and all of a sudden your child also had a rough day and he or she is crying and you're just like, I can't handle this. Everyone's been there.
Yeah.
And I think when you recognize that and you recognize where you're at, being able to tap out, whether that's your partner, a parent, a trusted friend, and just saying, I just need 5 minutes to re-regulate myself. Because it's really in those moments when everybody's really amped up emotionally that we tend to kind of fall off the bandwagon.
Wow. And when you intake a patient, do you have like a approach to work with the family as well? Or how does that work?
Yeah. So I no longer do therapy, but back when I did therapy, I would really just be open. I would kind of figure out where is the family coming from, what's their history, what's their belief system, what are values that are important to them, and that's where we start. From there, really just figuring out what do parents and kids know and what don't they know. Again, just meeting them where they're at and just focusing on building them up from there.
Do you help in those strategy sessions or when you are doing that, maybe to help the parent come up with a set of boundaries or rules? Give us some examples of the rules that they establish as a family.
Yeah. And so I guess some things would be back when I did a lot of trauma focused work. So these kids, unfortunately, would go through something pretty bad and then they would end up in my office and I'd work with them from there. So a lot of those things might look like, for example, physical boundaries. What is safe versus unsafe touch? Okay, so we know that when we go to the doctor needs to do a checkup. And sometimes they do need to check on those private areas that are covered up by a swimsuit. That's not necessarily an unsafe touch though, right? Because we need to make sure that you're healthy. For our littles, especially when they're toddlers, they're still in diapers. We know that our caregivers, our teachers, our daycare workers, mom and dad, those types of people are having to change diapers and just teaching them that, that is a safe touch. What is unsafe is when it becomes a little more inappropriate and just kind of meeting them where they're at in terms of communicating what that might be.
And what happened to a child's brain when with that kind of trauma? Is it rewire? How do you come back from an experience like that as a child?
Well, what's amazing is children are resilient. I think even adults, humans are resilient in general. And so typically what happens is if a traumatic event occurs, the child may become more reactive to a situation. And that's what I refer to as a bottom-up process. If we think of the brain, a lot of research indicates bottom-up process means we're really just reacting in the moment, fight, flight, or freeze, versus a top-down process where we're really thinking things through. When we focus on that bottom-up process, we meet the child where they're at. We teach them those skills of like deep breathing, grounding, being present in the moment, because a lot of times with trauma, there are things such as flashbacks. There are things that can really affect how someone's perceiving stimulation around them and their environment. So keeping them in the present, helping them recognize that they're safe. Those are all things that we help do to help a child and adults overcome those challenges.
Wow. Yeah. And for parents at home that are looking for strategies on self-regulate to be able to set those boundaries in a healthy way,
Yes.
what would you recommend?
I would recommend, first and foremost, a common one is deep breathing. So I call it 4-7-8 breathing. You're going to breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. I would do that for a few cycles. And then just make sure that the breath is coming from the belly. So if people were in band or choir, they know belly breathing. That's what we're really shooting for.
What you do is so important. I heard on a statistic that 36% of adults are emotionally intelligent. That means that most adults out there don't have these skills. So what you're doing, thank you for being on the show. I'm talking about this important topic because we really need to bring awareness to what's happening and the importance of being self-regulated before approaching a child and giving them rules, because a lot of parents set boundaries that don't make any sense, right?
Absolutely.
So what is the difference between like a healthy boundary and a boundary that I don't even know how to call that type of boundary?
So I would say healthy boundaries are boundaries that are age appropriate, reasonable, and really is just meant to ensure everyone's safety. And unhealthy boundaries, sometimes I know we love to make sure our kids are safe, but sometimes if we're a little too overprotective, we also kind of prevent them from experiencing the world in a safe way.
Absolutely. And that's a good point, because there are parents that have very strict boundaries, right? Don't go in this chair, don't do this, don't climb. And what are the consequences of not allowing your child to experience the world, as you said?
So sometimes these children do end up becoming a little bit more anxious. That is a possibility. As they get older, either they might become more anxious or depressed, or sometimes they may become angry. They may begin lashing out. And while these tend to be more extreme cases, that doesn't happen with everybody. Those are just some possibilities.
That amazing. I just read a book, The Anxious Generation. I forgot the name of the author, but I will give him credit. And it was so interesting. And one of his phrases, it says that we parents of kids born after 1995, that they were born in this generation, digital, tend to be overprotective of the outside world and underprotective of what's happening in online, right?
Yes.
So setting boundaries with devices and things like that, what would be healthy? Do you address this in your practice?
Absolutely. And so I think, especially while they're younger, elementary, middle, even high school, just knowing that, hey, you're not old enough for social media. Once they are old enough, and if you and your partner agree, just saying, okay, we can think about social media, but know that we need to be checking it just to be safe. We can't just add anybody. Really, it's internet safety. It's all about, we're not going to add some random person from across the world to our social media. We're really just looking at who's in our friend group. Like, who do we know? Jimmy from the soccer team? Absolutely. Carrie from math class? Sure. Yeah. But not some random person.
So, that they start asking for that after they're 10, I guess, right?
They can.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So, and then if you have a boundary plan, a healthy boundary of things, the screen time and what to do, what not to do in the house, and then they don't follow that. What are the consequences? Should parents establish consequences for that?
I do think consequences are important. And I do believe that as a child gets older and as they have those critical thinking skills, part of what we can do is saying, okay, have that conversation with your child. You didn't follow our rules. Yeah. You made a mistake, and that's okay, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. But what are some consequences that you believe are fair? And if you work with your child to establish what those consequences look like and what's fair, when it happens in the moment, it's like, hey, we came up with this together. And so now this is what's going to happen.
Oh, wow. You said a very interesting thing. So you work with your child and come up with a consequence for this?
Absolutely. And that's something that I really encourage for those parents whose kids are able to think like that. Really, it's two-part. So the first is buy-in. It's not like, Mom, you're so old, you're out of touch. It's like, well, let me listen to you. We're teaching them multiple things as well. We're teaching them how to communicate. We're teaching them how to think critically. We're also teaching them every action has a consequence, whether it's good or bad. And so the more we encourage them to critically think through these actions, the more that they're getting that practice in a safe manner.
And that setting those boundaries with your child starts at what age?
Well, we can actually start probably as early childhood. So whether that's 2 or 3, depending on where your child is at cognitively, sometimes 2 may be a little young, but definitely by pre-K, kindergarten. All right, so we have natural consequences. Maybe we go to the beach. I think, every parent has had that experience of maybe your child wants to bring something home that you don't want them to bring home.
Yeah.
So let's take, for example, I want to bring a bucket of sand home. Sure, you can bring that bucket of sand home, but you're going to have to carry it all the way from the beach to the car. Chances are your 4-year-old is not going to be able to carry that bucket of sand. And so that's a natural consequence. Talking to them probably when they're a little bit older, like 9, collaborating with them more on what's appropriate versus not appropriate in terms of punishment is definitely something that you can start definitely by teenage years, really just diving deep into that.
Because one of the things that the previous generation mastered was the art of punishment.
Yes.
Because they were really good at it, right? You talk to a lot of adults nowadays, and they tend to say, my parents punished me this way. What are the consequences of punishment in young and old children that don't make any sense? Yeah. Like, for example, sitting or for like an hour in a chair.
Yeah, so great question. Research actually indicates that can be helpful. It's actually not as beneficial let's talk about timeout. Timeout is less beneficial and harder to, I guess, follow through with, depending on how long we're doing that. So, all right, you did that. You got to go in the corner, go stand in the corner. Really, if we are doing something like that, I would say about a minute for every year that they are of age. So a 2-year-old, we're not going to say stand in the corner for 10 minutes. 1, we're setting them up for failure and you're going to get frustrated. 2, their attention span just isn't there. Yeah. And so really when we use something like that, it should be immediate. We really want to be able to say stand in the corner for a 2-year-old, 2 minutes, or sit down. You're going to sit down for 2 minutes and then we'll come back out. That way it's effective and they understand, and it's not going to be, I guess, overstimulating for you as a parent when they start running out of the corner.
And that's a great advice, but some punishments don't seem like punishment, because somebody's like, go to your room, but there you have your TV, your video games and stuff like that. So that's not a punishment. That's like probably good.
Yeah. And so I think when we think about limiting electronics, that is something that we should consider as well. Not that we should always limit those electronics, but there is a time and a place for them. Setting limitations on how much screen time we have. When you do go to your room, you're not going to be on those devices. And so just kind of thinking about those things.
I wonder how it will look in your household to write a couple of rules for your child. How would it look like in your household?
I think the rule number 1 would always be to always show respect. Show respect to yourself, show respect to your peers and to others that you come in contact with. Rule number 2 is to be honest. Honesty, I like to say honesty is the best policy. If you come to me and you say, I really messed up, maybe you did something you weren't supposed to do and you got into a bad situation, call me, let me know. We're not going to deal with it in the moment, but we will talk about it at a later time, right? This is especially true when kids become teenagers. But for my little one, I want to start that rule of let's be honest, because when we're honest with each other, that's how we avoid more serious consequences down the line.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom on how to set boundaries, starting with young children. So we thank you for tuning in. And also, if you like and you find this amazing episode full of wisdom helpful, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you in the next episode.